Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mr. M Rocks. In this lesson, we're going to make some changes to our PhatKids game. This is lesson 10, and I'm going to run the program as it is right now. The only thing I've really changed at this point is I put in a different bitmap for the background, and I added different waypoints. And so you can see the waypoints, I've left them visible so you can see where the stars are. I believe there's 31. And if I take the turrets out currently, they're doing just what they did before. They're following the closest enemy. And they're not firing. They're only going to fire when I click the mouse. And so we want to change that. A couple of changes we're going to make. We're going to change it so that the enemies will fire whenever the turrets will fire whenever the enemy comes in range. And so I'm going to change some of the program so it'll have a little bit more flexibility. Inside the turret class, this is turret 1, inside my turret class, I am going to have some input parameters, because what I want to have happen at this point is I'm going to have 4 different turrets, and each turret is going to have its own cost, its own range, and its own bullet hit points. And so I can send those into the constructor as parameters. The reason for this is the cost of each turret will vary depending on how powerful it is. And so a turret with a very short range and short bullet or weak bullet hit points is going to cost less than a turret with a very long range and more powerful hit points, or whatever combination you want. That's how you get to tweak the game. But in any case, right now, let's go back down to see where we make our turrets. If we come back into our PhatKids class, we notice that we make a turret right here. This is called from the tile spawn turret method. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change this so that when I create a new turret, I'm going to pass in 3 parameters. And I'll just say, for now, 100, 100, and 100. These are going to be values that represent the range, the bullet hit points, and the cost. And if I have that for all of my turrets, right now I'll just leave them all identical. I can tweak it later. I just want to get this working. And so I've got these 4 guys. Now, since when I create a new turret 1, I'm sending these 3 parameters, I've got to receive 3 parameters when I have in the constructor. So right here, I'm going to say, let's say range is going to be a number, and then I'm going to have bullet hit points. I'll say B for bullet hit points right now, and that's going to be a number also. And finally, I'm going to have cost, which will also be a number. Okay, there we go. And then when I create turret 1, I get these 3 values, and I'm going to send them up to my super constructor. So I'll have R, B, and C, and those get sent up as well. Now I need to do this for each of my turrets, and then I'm going to go back and do it for my super class. Remember that each of these turrets extends turrets, and so when I use the word super, I'm referring to my turret class. I'm going to do this for each of my 4 turrets, and then I'm going to come back here where it says turret 1 again. I'm going to take my input parameters for my super class, and I'll put the same thing in each of these guys. And at this point, I'm getting close. Oh, what did I do here? So at this point, I'm getting close, but I have to go back before any of this is going to work. I've got to change my super class as well, or the turret class. So I'm going to come back in here now. This guy needs to receive 3 parameters. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to set up 3 private fields here. And so I'm going to use the keyword private, make a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and say range. And this guy's just going to be a number. And I want to do this for my 3 guys. Actually, range should be lowercase because that's a variable, not a class. And now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for my others. I'm going to have bullet hit points and cost. So let's call this guy bullet HP for bullet hit points, and this guy will be cost. So that's pretty simple. And now down here in the constructor for the turret class, this is the constructor function, I need to receive the 3 parameters that I'm sending in. I'm sending in 3 guys that are numbers. Doesn't matter what I call them here so much, but what matters is as I receive them in here, they need to be the same number and the same type. So 3 parameters, each being of type number. So let's go ahead and do the same thing here. I'm going to say R is a number, and I'll say BHT is a number, and I will say C is a number also. Okay, there we go. And what I need to do next is set each of these guys equal to these three input parameters. And this is called encapsulation. And what this is doing, since these guys are private, as soon as I send these in, when this guy is constructed, range, I'm going to say this dot range is equal to R. And so the value that's getting sent in here, R, is getting loaded into my local value range, my local field range, and it's private, so I can't access that from outside unless I have special functions I create called getters and setters that will allow me to access that. I'll do the same thing here. I'll say BHT. Whoops, I'm going to say bullet hit points, same thing I have up here, bullet HP. And I'm going to set that equal to BHT. And then finally, I'm going to have this dot, and I'll call this guy cost is equal to, and we'll say C. Okay, now I'm ready to use these. I think the program will run right now. Yeah, okay, so everything looks like it's working okay. Nothing's changed though in terms of hitting. But what I can do now that I've created this guy range, when I take my constructor and I create turret 1, for instance, it's got this guy range, so now turret 1 knows what its range is. And what I'm going to do is, where it says fire turret, I'm going to take this code, and right now this is set up so that when I hit the mouse, I call this guy called fire turret, and it shoots the turret. I want that to change. And I'm going to come back where it says update turret, and I'm going to plug that in right at the bottom here. That's basically the content of my function, fire turret. I'm going to comment this guy out for right now. And what I'll do here is, this guy is going to fire the turret right now whenever the parent is not null and whenever the fire delay is less than 0. I'm going to add one more parameter here, and I'm going to say only do this when my turret comes within range. And so let's go ahead and say and. We're going to add one more. Remember the and, the logical operator and, has all of the values in this chain have to be true. And so I'm going to have one more value here. I've already got a function called get distance to enemy. And so I'm going to take him and I'm going to put him right here, get distance to enemy. But instead of EI, I'm going to take whatever the current enemy is. And so the current enemy is, remember, a field that's up on top. So that has that's not changing, even though this is being used inside this function. Since I declared it up here, he's going to be constant throughout the class. In any case, E current enemy, and I want to make sure that guy is less than or equal to this dot range. And I can just use the word range now. I don't have to use the keyword this. But just so I know I'm pointing to the same field, if I run this, it doesn't like this. And that's because I took out fire turret. He no longer exists. So I got to take out that guy. Let's go ahead and run it again. And if I take this guy, if I put him down here, he's not firing. But if I put him here, as soon as the enemy gets within 100 units or 100 pixels, that's the range. And my teddy bear will shoot. So I could change the range now. For instance, if I were to go back to PhatKids, and for turret 1, let's leave the range at 100, and for turret 4, let's make the range 600. Okay, just to see what the difference is now, I can have flexibility. If I take turret 1 and I put him down here, he's not going to fire. But if I take turret 4 and put him down here, he will fire. Okay, they have different ranges. Now we're going to go ahead and make some other changes and be right back. Okay, welcome back. We're going to do a couple of things in this next chunk. We're going to make changes to the range. Right now, if I were to run the program, notice that what's going to happen is that every time I drag a turret out, I've got the same range, regardless of what the range actually is. This little white half sort of opaque circle shows up. And what I want to do is I want to match the radius of that white circle to be the actual range. Right now it's just set up by taking this guy right here. When I have the range, I have a default value that I send into the range constructor. Right now it's 300. If I change that to 100, for instance, and rerun the program, notice that these white circles get different, and you can see as I drag them out, now that reflects 100 pixels from the center of my turret. turret is still facing each of the enemies, but what I want to do is I want to set the range of, or the radius of that to be the same as the actual range for each individual turret now that I have those values set. And so I'll be working in the turret class. I'll also be working in the range class. So remember, let's take a look at the range class. The range class, as it sits right now, has an input, has a range, and I'm going to change the name of this to range radius. And so we'll set that just blank, and I'm going to change that to a number. And so this guy's going to be a number. And it's a private field. So just like we did before, and I'm going to only be able to change this with getters and setters. So when I bring this guy, when I have an input value in here, I'm going to set range radius equal to whatever r is. And again, when I do this up front, I'm going to go ahead and use the keyword this to make sure I'm talking about this field right here. And so that's a private field, range radius, it's a number, and when I say this, range radius is equal to r, whatever I put in here as an input is going to get set. So right now I have that set to 100, and the range radius is going to be 2 times the radius and 2 times the height will give me the dimensions of my circle, and I'm setting the alpha to 0.25. Now what I want to do is I want to be able to change that. If I were to leave it like this, every single turret would have whatever I have in that input value, but I want each of these to have its own sort of default or its own independent range value. And so I'm going to create another function. This guy's going to be public function, and he is going to be, let's say, set range. So I'll say set range radius. Okay. And so set range radius is going to be, maybe I'll change the word to update, because it's already been set up above, so let's go ahead and update that. So we're going to update range radius, and this guy is simply going to receive in a parameter, won't return anything, but if I hit in here, I'm going to receive in r, which is going to be a number, and I will simply take this guy, this dot range radius, and actually I can just copy this code exactly. So if I come down here and get a new range, now this r and this r are not the same. This r only exists between these two curly brackets. This r only exists between these two curly brackets. And so now this range is going to be set, and it'll simply update the dimensions of whatever this guy is. And so every time I call this function, it's public, so I can call it from my PhatKids class, and so forth. So the other thing I'm going to change is in my turret class. Let's see, I can go ahead and get rid of this guy now. And so I will copy one of these functions, and I want to create a guy that's going to be get range. And so get range is going to tell me whatever the range is for this function. So get range, and he's not going to have an input parameter. He's going to return a number, and all I'm going to do is return whatever the range is for this. Now remember, this guy has an input parameter of range up here. I'm setting this field, range field, equal to whatever r is, and since this guy is private range number set in between the class and the constructor function, I have access to this throughout the entire class. And if I return range here, for whatever turret this happens to be, it's going to give me the specific range for that turret. And so let's simply go to File, Save All, and now I'll come back here and notice that I have this set up currently so that when I create a turret, I'm calling this guy called set ranger. And set ranger is going to, range x is going to equal turret x. So this is actually making the range, which is that white circle, sort of half opaque circle, follow the turret location. What I want to do up here in add turret though is I would like to set the dimensions of range, and so I can do that by simply taking this guy and say range dot let's see, I just created this guy over here called set or update range radius. So if I take this guy and simply say update range radius, and give it a value, it will simply update that value. And the value that I'm going to give it is whatever I have here. It's going to be get range, and so that's a method inside the turret. And so all I need to do is back here, since I'm receiving in a turret, I'm going to say t dot get range, and that should do it. So update range radius t. So this is going to get the radius, the range radius for this particular turret. It's going to update the range of this guy, and if I've set this all up correctly, notice this guy comes out at 100. This guy does 2. This guy's actually are all 100. The reason for that is that I haven't changed them when I actually create the turrets. They're all 100. So if I change this, let's just for effect change this to 80. We'll change this to 200, 300, and 400. If I were to run the program now, this guy is small, this guy is larger, this guy is larger still, and this guy is the largest. So now each range reflects the range for the individual turrets, and so each turret now has its own range. When I create a specific turret, it gets that range, it sets that value into range radius, and I'm good to go. In the next one, the next lesson, we're going to talk about creating a bank, and so we'll use that cost parameter so that each turret, we can't grab it unless we have enough money in our bank. And so that's it for today. Bye-bye.